Hello, everyone. I recently encountered something that made me laugh. Another word that would suffice to describe this would also be a bit sad, but I would like to speak about it for those reasons, and that would be a particular decision that the Biden administration has made, of course, with the help of Congress. So I want to read this to you very quickly. President Biden signed into law the historic Justice for Victims of War Crimes Act, giving the Department of Justice jurisdiction to prosecute persons present in the U.S. for war crimes committed anywhere, regardless of the nationality of a lying perpetrator or victim. This law passed with strong bipartisan support, better aligns with the U.S., with our allies, and the Geneva Conventions, and gives the DOJ the ability to try Russians responsible for war crimes in Ukraine should they come to the U.S. How lovely. And this is a little tweet from Michael Tracy that I thought was pretty funny. This new law is really something. Sponsored by Lindsey Graham and Dick Durbin, the U.S. now declares authority to prosecute anyone in the world for war crimes at any time without limitation, while still refusing to accept any jurisdiction of the international criminal courts. Yes, that is correct. The U.S. Cur- uh, uh, con- currently, constantly, and continuously refuses any jurisdiction of the international criminal courts. So, and by the way, the U.S. obviously is an entity that believes themselves to be completely blame free in any particular situation, brushing off any kind of reprimands from any international entity that would like to, speak negativity, I guess, in the eyes of the U.S. leaders on any of their actions that may or may not be considered a quote unquote war crime. But to get a little bit more into this new law, so this is taking it back to December. This is from Just Security. So they say earlier this week, Congress, and this is before Biden signed it into law, earlier this week, Congress passed a bill that will update federal law to enable prosecution of alleged war criminals in the United States, regardless of the nationality of the perpetrator or the victim. The Senate passed the bill hours before Ukrainian President Zelensky addressed a joint session of Congress. Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine has resulted in thousands of potential war crimes. Note, really hone in on this: thousands of potential war crimes um, by Russian troops against Ukrainian civilians, including attacks on schools, hospitals, and extrajudicial killings, torture, and gender-based violence. The House passed the bill the following day. So, long story short, they're updating this law that previously didn't give the government the authority to prosecute those guilty, they say, that's very important, they say, of war crimes that weren't American, essentially. But the reason I've chosen to talk about this and why in the beginning of the video I said it was funny and really sad and honestly embarrassing is another word to describe this, is that this is just another ploy, another act of theatrics to get people kind of riled up and to affirm their support for the ongoing war in Ukraine. So, as I just read there, in many instances, they brought up Ukraine and the need, because it's such a dire one, to prosecute these Russian criminals for their war crimes and the killing and murdering of civilians and what have you in Ukraine. Now, while some of those things may not be able to be disputed because there is indeed a real war going on in that region of the world, and people are indeed losing their lives in many different fashions that some may or may not agree or disagree with. But that's not the point. The point is that we have the United States, the world's leading terrorist group that's responsible for crimes that if I sat here and actually read them out to you, we'd be here for hours on end, and none of us have that kind of time. This particular state is telling us that they are now going to start prosecuting war criminals of any background, of any descent, without limitations whatsoever, because they can, and it's the right thing to do. And it's especially the right thing to do because of what's going on right now in Ukraine. Here's a quick idea, and one may even call it a solution. How about if we're going to start prosecuting people for their war crimes, we start with those here at home? Now, needless to say, we're extremely late to the party. We've missed out on a lot. But luckily, or maybe it's unluckily, many of them are still around. One of them occupied the seat of the presidency right now, Mr. Joe Biden. You might recall that during the Afghanistan pullout, after the terrorist bombing at I believe it was the Kabul airport, Joe Biden promised to get back at those mean terrorists that caused that extremely sad and unfortunate bombing at that airport that killed U.S. service members. Well, he did retaliate, but he didn't get the people that were responsible for that bombing. No, he got a very innocent family, of which one gentleman, a part of that family, was a U.S. aid worker. Needless to say, some of the individuals that were killed, that were a part of that family, that died in that drone strike ordered by Mr. Biden as a retaliation, were indeed children. That seems like a war crime. That seems like something that individual needs to face time over. You know, if we're gonna start throwing war criminals in the slammer, let's go knock on the door of Mr. George Bush. And there's a long list. And like I said, we'd be here for a very long time. But what this really is, and what I want you to understand, is that acts like this promising to bring these criminals to justice for what they're doing over in Ukraine, is essentially just trying to get the American public to sign on and to agree with what our government is doing in Ukraine. See, in order to justify a war, especially in pretty much anything, you need public support. And one of the best ways to get public support is to manufacture consent and make it seem like they're doing it for a just cause. And when you paint the enemy as, here we go, war criminals, people that have committed crimes in war, well, that's a pretty easy way to say, well, do you want to be on the side of these guys, or do you want to be on the side of the people fighting for justice? And we know who the United States, the West, their NATO allies, and Western leaders would say who are on the side of justice. But needless to say, this is another ridiculous, honestly stupid development from the White House. Honestly, it should make anyone that looks at it cringe.